Our guest today on Take Command, former great Washington lineman, won 3 Super Bowl trophies, also with the Denver Broncos. He's on the call this weekend for Fox Sports with my guy Adam Amin. It's Mark Schlereth. Stink, welcome to Take Command.
Oh, man, thanks. It's my pleasure. Great to be here.
Absolutely, our pleasure to have you. And, you came on the radio show with me over the summer and it talked about, in many places beyond the show with me, about, kind of your relationship with the franchise under Dan Snyder. For those that missed that interview, wasn't great. Not your favorite guy, which makes you, one of many. But for you to get to call this game, for you personally, before we get into the teams themselves, to be there week one of the Josh Harris era at a sold-out FedEx Field, what's it mean to you?
I think it's huge. To me, it's welcome back to the National Football League, Washington Commanders. It was we missed you. It's nice to have you back. And to get the love and just the sense of how important this is to just the Commander faithful, to all the people who were, a fan of the Washington football team, the Redskins, and now the Commanders. It's really cool. And there's this feeling for me of the Wizard of Oz. For those of you who don't remember the movie, the old time movie, when Dorothy kills the Wicked Witch of the West, and then all the henchmen of the Wicked Witch of the West line up and just say, all hail Dorothy. They start marching around, they get all excited about it. And that's how I feel about the demise of Daniel Snyder. Like, everybody is like, thank goodness we get to root for our favorite team again. And, you get the sense that so many people walked away in disgust with what went on with this franchise. And I think back, and it's funny, on my podcast, The Stinking Truth, I recorded it today. I'll release it on Friday. But I talked about how Washington, when I came into the National Football League, was one of the crown jewels. Oh, the jewel on the crown of the NFL, and how far they have fallen. And to see them have that opportunity to regain the respect of the rest of the National Football League, and to go out there and compete, and to not have that cloud hanging over them that is, and that was Daniel Snyder. I couldn't be happier for the franchise. I couldn't be more excited about calling the game.
Yeah, no, it's great that you get to be there. And, obviously looking forward to watching you on Sunday. Well, those of us that won't be there, luckily I'm going to get to swing by. It'll be my turn, actually, Mark, my first time at FedEx Field since 2019. So I've also stayed away from that terrible place.
Wow.
But it is finally, as you know, the traffic and just getting there was something that actually the ownership has talked about. It's brutal. It sucks. And so to actually feel like going to the game in person is worth it, is something that I think a lot of people haven't been able to say in a long time, and certainly myself included on that
Mhm.
front. Also, there's hope on the actual field. Sam Howell, obviously the center of that, so much talent, so much upside, but very unproven. What have been your first impressions of Sam based off the Dallas game last year and what you saw from him in the preseason this year?
Yeah, I think one is excitement about potential, about the ceiling of Sam Howell. Like, there's no question he's a really talented guy. I think, like a lot of young quarterbacks, one of the things I saw throughout this preseason was a guy that occasionally, and I think this is all young quarterbacks for the most part, when it comes to protection, especially coming out of the college game, protection is an issue. And so what you see guys oftentimes doing is escaping the protection of the pocket because of the color that flashes. And oftentimes that color is picked up. It's a late game, it's a twist game, it's a back coming from one side of the formation to the other side of the formation to picking somebody up. And what you see oftentimes is young guys don't trust it. So they automatically flush before they're forced to flush. And when you flush out of the protection of the pocket, now you're eliminating half of your receiving core, right? And you're getting to one side of the field. And oftentimes what ends up happening is you miss big time designed opportunities because you're a little bit quick out of the pocket. And it was interesting. I got a chance to talk to Drew Lock this preseason. I did the Seattle Seahawks last preseason game, and I went out to practice for 2 or 3 days. And Drew Lock was a young quarterback in Denver, where I live, and I talked to him about, like, just the maturation process of being that young guy that got an opportunity to start, didn't work out, go to Seattle, back up. And there's a belief in Seattle that Drew Lock can be a really good, like, starting quarterback. And I asked him, what's been the biggest change for you? He goes, trusting protection. I didn't understand protection. Like in college, we were either spread, get the ball out right now, or we were 7-man protections, flag a play action, and shoot the ball deep down the field. So I never had to worry about re-identifying a mic. I never had to worry about term protection. I never worried about who my hot guy is, and how to get to that guy. And the NFL is different that way. You've got to understand that protection, and you've got to be able to trust it. And you've got to be able to be a great scrambler within the pocket, manipulating, moving, not seeing the rush, feeling it, moving away from it, staying in that pocket that provides you that protection so that you can deliver the ball down the field. And, I saw a couple plays in this preseason that had you been able to stay a hair longer, had you trusted it a hair more, you're talking about an incomplete pass. It's a 30 yard, 30 yard kind of explosive play. And the way it's been broken down for me over the years, that when you create an explosive play, so it depends on who's defining explosive plays, but oftentimes NFL teams define that as a 10-yard plus running play. Some people put it at 12, but 10 yards plus running play is an explosive run, and 17 yards plus passing play is an explosive play. Some teams put it at 20. But the overall thought process, every explosive play is about the equivalent of 2.6 points when you hit an explosive. So that's the equation. Like you cannot literally, it's almost impossible to put a scoring drive together without a couple of explosive plays within that scoring drive. It's almost impossible to go 6 yards, 5 yards, 8 yards, 4 yards, 2 yards, 8 yards, 6 yards, 4, without blowing yourself up, having a holding call, a false start, illegal formation, something that puts you behind the chains that you have to punt. And so those explosive plays are incredibly valuable. And when you miss one because you see color flash and you're like, oh, I don't know if it's picked up, I got to get out of here. That's the problem with young quarterbacks. And that's the maturation that Sam Howell's going to have to go through.
No doubt. And I'm so bummed that the timing didn't work out, that Paulson couldn't be here, because I would just sit back at this point and be like, all right, you guys talk about protection, former blocking tight end that he is. But I think that, to my knowledge level, this is definitely something that I saw in the preseason as well. And you hear coaches talk about with him, and you see it in those preseason games. And I'm curious, like, as a former O-lineman yourself, like what the conversations are like between line and quarterback, not just in terms of, hey man, we had you, like we had it, like trust us, go attack.
Right.
And maybe there's, a Charles Leno, a more veteran guy that has that conversation with Sam, but also, setting up in the first place correctly, what the communication is like between, say, a center, Nick Gates, in Washington's case, and Sam, to set the protections in the first place to make sure that you're in a position to succeed. Because I think that's something we saw last year a lot. Obviously, different quarterback, different OC, but there were times that the right protection call just wasn't there. Everyone executes and the quarterback gets blasted because they didn't have it called properly. So what's the communication like? Obviously it's not happening at the line of scrimmage as the play clock's ticking down, but between whatever coaches are involved, the offensive lineman and the quarterback, to make sure that you're set up to succeed in the first place.
Yeah, well, it depends. Every team is a little bit different. And I'm a believer in my day, we always set the protection. So we would get a protection call and then we would set it. And if we wanted to cheat it, and re-identify Mike or cheat it beyond one guy to a slot corner or something of that nature, depending on the defensive look you got, we had the freedom to do that. And we could call it out on our timing. The problem that you get into when you let quarterbacks decide from their vantage point is obviously a lot of times a quarterback will see something that he thinks is coming, a blitz that he thinks is coming, or, want to change or re-identify a Mike, and he gets to it late and, he goes from, hey, 52's the Mike, 52's the Mike. No, 47, set up. And then the communication doesn't get passed down from center to guard to tackle to tight end to, backside guard, depending on the slide and all those things. So I'm a big believer, especially with young quarterbacks, we set the protection. We tell you where we're going and, the 4 downs plus 1 or however we're doing that. We let you know what we're doing. And therefore, we're in charge of that. And now you have to understand where you're hot and where you're not, where you're picked up. And so the understanding of that protection, to me, is paramount to success of the quarterback. If you don't understand where you're not picked up, Um, and you don't understand who's hot and who's not. Like you're going to get absolutely lambasted in the pocket. And a lot of times, what you'll hear is announcers that don't understand protection going, "Well, this offensive line isn't very good." And I'm like, no, that's 100% on the quarterback. You've got to understand those things. So I like to take as much off a young quarterback's plate as possible, right? They always say, hey, the best friend of a young quarterback is a running game. Like three things: a running game, great defense, and a tight end, right? Like middle of the field, the little spot routes and, spacing concepts where you get the ball, scat Hank stuff, where you get the ball to that guy in the middle and you get an automatic 6, 7 yards, and now you keep yourself in front of the chains. If you can do that consistently, well, a young quarterback's got an opportunity to thrive. And so that game is really important. And I'm a big believer that Nick Gates and the rest of the guys up front should be in charge of that, especially with a young quarterback.
Yeah, no, that's 100% what happened to them in the preseason too, where the pressures that happened in those games were on Sam. Not a lot of snaps, and I'm not saying the offensive line is 100% a point of certainty
Mm-hmm.
here by any stretch of the imagination, but the pressures they did see in the preseason were definitely on Sam and his inability to get the ball out, know where he's hot, the exact stuff that you're talking about. I also saw a quote from you. I don't know whether you talked to Nikki Javala for a story or whether she pulled it from
Yeah,
somewhere
I
else,
did.
but
Yeah,
um,
yesterday, Nikki.
yeah, so she had this great quote from you about what you saw from Sadiq Charles on tape in the preseason. You were a big fan of what you've seen from him, which I think is interesting because I think the narrative here, Mark, was shaped a little bit by how much time he missed and people were frustrated. You got to see him when he got out there, and that's ultimately what matters, what happens when you produce so long that he stays on the field. What did you like so much about Sadiq, and how do you feel about the rest of that offensive line from what you saw in the preseason?
Well, Sadiq is a full-grown ass man, and
Sure is.
he was like, there's a couple things. One, that dude is a powerful individual, like a powerful individual, and his steps and his body mechanics, his quickness off the ball, and his angles and his technique to funnel guys where he wants it. Like he put on a preseason masterclass in dominating the line of scrimmage. Like I've read articles, and I read every day Fox sends me like all the Commanders articles, all the Arizona articles, right? You read, and you're trying to develop storylines, and you're trying to look at the teams, and I'm studying film, and I'm doing all these things. But I kept hearing, "Hey, Dotson is going to, this is going to be a breakout Pro Bowl year," and it may be, and he's incredible talent. I couldn't take my eyes off Sadiq Charles. Like he was dominant in the preseason. And the preseason is interesting because oftentimes you're very static. You're not showing a lot of motion. You're not showing a lot of game planning stuff. You're just running plays as opposed to running your offense. So to dominate in the preseason when a lot of it's just one on one and you're not setting guys up. You're just letting them go out there and play. To dominate in those conditions is like that's the toughest time. That's the hardest place to dominate. So I was thoroughly impressed with him. I thought Nick Gates played well in the preseason. Leno is a professional player. He's good. I think the right side there's a little bit of question mark. Sam Cosmi, going inside, the game happens so much faster inside than it does outside, and you saw him at times with just bad sets, bad footwork. He's a tall land giant type guy, so leverage sometimes becomes a problem inside there. But I certainly see this offensive line once you put a game plan together and you start calling the offense as opposed to calling plays, which Bieniemy will do once the season starts. I definitely see this offensive line gelling. It's been a question of weakness, and people talk about it. But let me just say, you can take average guys up front and make them really good. You can take good guys up front and make them excellent as a group. And that comes with play callers. When you start calling the offense so that your guys have opportunities to change up sets, to change their techniques up, to vice different guys, to change up the one-on-ones, to get double teams across the board, to do all those things that we do, as the secret kind of mushroom society that we are. Um, that's when you have a chance to be really, really good. And I see that potential. We'll see if it happens. I mean, Eric Bieniemy is an interesting case study. And I don't know Eric well, but he was a CU guy. Probably when I was playing for the Broncos. The one thing about Bieniemy is he was classically trained in the kind of Mike Shanahan, Gary Kubiak, wide zone West Coast offense, and then he's kind of melded that together with what he learned in Kansas City with Andy Reid, who probably lost the Super Bowl because he refused to run the ball against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like that was the ultimate in football hubris, and I think you saw the change for Andy Reid last year, running the ball more effectively, understanding the value of that, especially with guys who are beat up on the offensive line. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what kind of how he melds those two kind of philosophies together, because you got a couple of backs to me in Washington that are top notch players.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to see how that comes together. Last thing I'll ask you about Stink on the way out is the other team. What I mean, Arizona, everyone's kind of looking at them like, what are they doing? It's easy to laugh at them. They're still NFL players over there. It's week one. We haven't seen anything yet. But what do you make of Arizona without us having actually seen them on the field this season so far?
Well, I will tell you this. They're trying to, like we talked about Washington reintroducing themselves to the NFL with their ownership. Arizona's trying to reintroduce themselves to the NFL with an actual legitimate NFL system. And that's going to take some time. Jonathan Gannon was the defense coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, a really good coach. Gets buy-in from his players. But you have to understand what Arizona's done the last few years, drafting Josh
Yeah,
Rosen, yeah,
yeah.
who's been with like seven different teams. He was the most qualified NFL quarterback, quote unquote, and now he's been with six or seven teams. And then dumping him after a season and going after Kyler Murray and going after Cliff Kingsbury, and running this janky college offense in the NFL. And they were talented enough over the last few years to score late in the half, score late in the game, compile some meaningless stats and touchdowns, and to make you, I call it the illusion of competitiveness. They would give you the illusion that they're a competitive football team. They're garbage. Like they didn't do anything to me that is endemic of winning in the National Football League. But they would play you close enough to make everybody think that they're close. They get four or five wide receivers in the spread offense, and they make some plays. But the bottom line is they couldn't dictate in any game. They couldn't hold leads. They just are not built that way. So Jonathan Gannon has come in there and said, "Hey man, I know we're not very talented, but we're actually going to run the ball. We're actually going to control the line of scrimmage. We're actually going to do some things that this franchise hasn't done in a long time. And so we're going to try to shorten some games. We're going to try to live that way. Quarterback is an issue right now. I believe that Joshua Dobbs will start, and that's just based on my knowledge of football and watching Joshua Dobbs versus Clayton Tune. Clayton Tune ain't ready for prime time, and a lot of the issues that we talked about with Sam Howell in a protection, but just a lot of, especially outside the numbers, a lot of errant throws, a lot of really just bad looks. So I think that's the direction they'll go. But I will say this about them: you may not know the players' names, but defensively they're really talented, and they play hard. Now in the preseason they flew around, they played their butts off, and they're a very talented defensive football team. And so, like that part, they'll give you um, a full day's work on the defensive side of the ball. And so, like I don't think they're going to be 0-17 like everybody thinks, but they lack some they lack some talent. They lack some talent at the quarterback position. Let's just be frank. And so and then they're trying to implement a real live NFL system. And I will be frank also, they just don't have a tight end that can block anybody. So that's a concern, but that's not how they were built, right? They were built on, we don't care if you can block. Let's just have everybody be a receiving tight end. Let's just spread this thing out. And, let's play college football in the National Football. I'm sorry, there's portions of it that work. I understand that, but it can't be where you hang your hat. And so they've got a lot of work in front of them, but I don't think they're going to be the rollover that everybody thinks they're going to be.
That's interesting. First time in Ron Rivera era that the Commanders are favored by more than a touchdown. It might even be double digits at this point. So, but then again, that Vegas doesn't exist to actually set lines; they exist to make money. So we will see what ultimately happens on Sunday. If you're watching it on television, you will see this man there along with Adam Amin on Fox Sports. Stink, hopefully I'll get to swing by the booth and say hello in person. Safe travels out this way, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
I appreciate that, and give Logan my best. Sorry we couldn't connect.
We will, and hopefully if you guys have another one later in the year, we'll make that happen. Thanks, Mark.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.